What's up, guys? This is Jakob. I'm Content AI Manager and founder of Content AI Tools. Welcome to a new episode of the Web3 Live Show. I'm the host of the show where I speak with experts around the world within the Web3 space. This is the Wild West, ladies and gentlemen. So there are no rules. If you like this is good. But many entrepreneurs are very nervous about this topic because there are no legal rules when it comes to Web3. So we are like I said, in the Wild West. And I'm super happy that I'm speaking today about the whole legal perspective with Nicholas Lauw. He is partner and he is also expert on technology and digital asset on RPC Premier Law in Singapore, which has maybe also the most delicious food on the planet, in my opinion. I was there in 2017, 2018, and yeah, we were traveling through Asia, and Singapore had, I think, the most interesting Indish food that I so far saw. But yeah, welcome to the show, Nicholas. Very happy to have you here.
Thanks, Jakub. It's great to be here, and thanks for having me on the show.
Yes. So I gave a short introduction. Can you introduce you maybe in a longer version? So why legal stuff, legal school, and why Web3? That would be interesting. Just super curious about that one.
Sure. So I've been in practice now about 15 years. I started as an intellectual property and technology lawyer in the Web 2 sense. So,
Okay.
traditional, I started by doing like, the typical kind of anti-counterfeiting stuff. And then I went into looking at technology agreements, software agreements, master services agreements, for Web 2 companies. And then slowly that has moved on into certain Web3 areas. So initially, of course, there's a certain overlap between IP and things like NFTs. And, I was asked to look at certain NFT projects, and we were asked to advise on some of the IP rights relating to those NFT projects, especially where they were engaging with third parties for like marketing. And then from there, of course, Web3 is much more than NFTs, as you know.
Yes.
And, since then, we've been asked to look at all sorts of things, from like structuring of DAOs to, like decentralized platforms. And, obviously on the side, I myself have been interested and I've been dabbling in some of the NFT projects, obviously to understand them better, to see where they're going. I think that's very important. I think that a lot of lawyers, they purport to be in this area, but they're not actually truly involved in the sense that some of them don't have a crypto wallet, some of them don't buy crypto, some of them
Do,
don't buy
do you have
NFTs.
do you have a crypto wallet?
I do.
Okay, cool. That already gives you a competitive advantage to 90% of the lawyers out there, I think. But yeah, that's cool. Yeah,
Yeah, I guess, most lawyers, when I speak to them, they think it's all a scam, if I'm gonna
yeah,
be honest.
exactly.
And I guess what's been happening recently hasn't really helped in that regard. But as I say, it's important to understand the space and where it's going. That's really where I've been trying to focus on.
Just like I just curious because I'm curious. So when you first got this first time you saw an NFT project, what was your thought? Did you thought, well, that's scam? I just don't believe this, or what was your thought process when you first got in touch with an NFT project?
I think the first thought that came to mind was obviously NFT projects started being when they started, it was all about the artwork, right? So,
Hmm.
it would be about owning the artwork. And of course, that in itself, from a legal perspective, raises certain red flags because the reality is the ownership of the token is separate from the ownership of the artwork. So just because you own the token doesn't necessarily mean you own the artwork. And that's something that has been borne out by the terms and conditions that have been released by some of these NFT projects subsequently. So if you look at like Punks, they relatively recently released their terms and conditions, and it's quite clear if you read that you don't own the IP at all. You just have a license to use it. So that was my first thought. Obviously, NFT projects have gone well beyond that now, and they're now talking about communities, talking about utilities. They're trying to provide value. Some of them are almost like lotteries. And so that they're advancing in all sorts of different ways. So we're seeing much more use cases than simply artwork. And with that in mind, obviously, the number of legal considerations increase.
Yeah. Okay, got it. So you mentioned Web 2 and IP, and now we are shifting more and more to Web 3. So where do you see the biggest differences when you compare Web 2 and Web 3 from a legal perspective? So is there something completely new, or would you add something to it? So what is your perspective on that one?
Well, I think, so it comes back to something you mentioned earlier about things being the Wild West, and
Hmm.
there are no rules. That statement, it's not quite true in the sense that there are existing laws, and it's always very important to apply the existing laws to what we know of Web3. There are a lot of people, I think, in Web3 who don't think this way, and unfortunately, as a result of this, they may be certain pitfalls. For example, like if you want to run a lottery out of your NFTs, whereby when you buy an NFT, essentially is a lottery ticket. Um, this can fall foul of certain rules. Like for example, in Singapore, you can't actually have a public lottery as a private citizen, so you can't start a public lottery. In the same way, if you wanted to release an NFT that gives you certain rights and certain assets, so you own shares, for example, in certain assets by buying the NFT. There are certain securities regulations that would apply because these tokens would essentially be securities, and so there are certain regulations that you will need to comply with. So these are all existing laws that you need to comply with, but obviously they apply to the Web3 landscape. Now, then the question is whether there needs to be changes in these laws to cater to Web3, and that probably is the case in certain ways. For example, a lot of people believe that if you own an NFT, you own the image, and if I transfer the NFT, you transfer ownership of the image. There is a rule under Singapore law, for example, under copyright, that an assignment of copyright needs to be in writing and signed by the parties. So already then, you have a law that potentially needs to change in Web3. And there are a lot of laws like that that potentially have to change. And at the same time, from what we're seeing now with what's been happening with FTX, you're going to get governments imposing regulations most likely to govern, what's been happening there because, there have been some comments that what happened in FTX would not have happened in a Web2 company, for example.
Yeah. I mean, this is only Singapore. I mean, imagine you're selling to somebody in America or I don't know, in Germany. So you have all these overlapping rules and laws. So it's becoming more complicated, right? So it's just not, I mean, I don't expect that you know the German law now, but so when I want to start my own Web3 project, so what should I have in mind? So should I just research what other people did, but maybe there are no use cases yet. So maybe let's stick to the NFT example. So if I want to start my own NFT project, so from Germany, what would you expect me to do?
Well, first of all, you have to understand what you are trying to do first. And obviously, you would have your roadmap and everything. And from your roadmap, you must understand what your objectives are and what you should implement as a result of that. So recently, we see NFT projects purporting to give certain benefits to users, utility to users. Some of them act like clubs, they have physical spaces, they are talking about communities. And with that in mind, it's important to get a set of terms and conditions in at a very basic level to just govern that because you may have to change the terms that you offer, the utility that you offer to your holders, and you don't want a situation whereby you're accused later on of rug pull, and you didn't, you basically misrepresented to your holders that they were going to get certain benefits when they don't. And it can be something that's completely out of your control. Like for example, if one of the utilities, you can't provide a certain utility anymore because the provider has gone bust. So these things have to be provided for. And then the point that you raised just now is a very good one about different countries having different rules. So obviously in Singapore, we've got a certain set of rules and other countries have their own rules. And of course, in Web3, these national boundaries fall away and you sell NFTs in OpenSea, anyone can buy them. So if you are, like, for example, going back to my initial statement about the thing I talked about earlier about securities laws, different countries will have different securities laws. So it may be the case that you have to check the securities laws of each individual country, which obviously would be potentially quite an expensive endeavor. But that's the kind of pitfall that you may have to consider when you release a Web3 project.
Yeah, yeah. So I use, for example, one it's called Triroll, and they minted my own cryptocurrency. So I'm the owner of the AI coin, but I have no idea what really this means from a legal perspective. They can't trade it. I can use this coin, and in the future I can pool it so that it raises to some degree. Yeah, that I can raise money for the coin, but there is no real utility for the coin. But I never thought about the legal consequences because I don't own blockchain. So this is a provider. This is basically a Web3 project, but by a Web2 tool, basically, because it is centralized. And
Mm.
what is your experience so far with crypto minting? Do you have use cases of that one, and maybe also pitfalls that you have to be aware of?
I mean, to be honest, I don't have a lot of experience in crypto minting, but I would say, obviously, if you look at something like Luna and the whole debacle that came out of that, I mean, obviously, I, I don't think, I wouldn't say that Do Kwon, when he first minted that coin would have thought about what might have happened. And I guess that's the lesson that comes out of that, in that, sometimes when things get big, you may encounter issues that you would not have considered when you first minted your coin, first launched your cryptocurrency. And obviously, you can see from what's been happening that the ramifications can be quite serious, and you eventually may need to go into certain amounts of exile to try to avoid, well, the consequences of what your actions are, even though you personally may not have intended those actions from the start. So
Uh,
it's it is a dangerous area potentially. I mean, obviously, it's one that you can make a lot of money in, but there are certain consequences to think about, and they may be things that you may not have thought about at the start.
uh, uh, Yeah, this reminds me of Joe Pulizzi, who is the founder of the Tilt and who also minted his own coin. He says, my tax advisor and my legal advisor, they just don't call me anymore because if I ask them something, they just ignore my calls. They don't answer me because they say, what is this guy doing? I mean, this yeah, maybe it's I don't know. Maybe it's too niche project that it's too far away from the normal crowd and the normal people. I don't know. I'm not sure. But yeah. Anyway, can you maybe give us some examples of your work within the Web3? So maybe use cases that you can speak about, that you're comfortable to speak about, and maybe the lessons that you learned or the clients learned from the experience so far. So always in as a reminder, what can we learn from these use cases?
I mean, so a lot of what I do is kind of confidential because that's obviously part of the advice that we give. But obviously, it's a learning experience for all of us. And as you say, like that guy you were mentioning who's tax lawyer and doesn't want to speak to him, a lot of we're all really learning in this space. And I think that, like, for lawyers as well, it is a steep learning curve to try to understand what's going on. Um, so we do try to understand the nuances of Web3 projects, and as a result, we have learned certain things ourselves. Obviously, what from my own experience, it's been quite interesting to try to apply the concepts that I know from Web2 projects to a Web3 decentralized platform, for example, where you have the basic terms and conditions. I think, like, for example, I'll just give you an example. I had
Hmm.
a client who had a decentralized platform, and they wanted to onboard companies, but they wanted to onboard companies in the usual kind of Web3 way. So they wanted a user to sign up and then put in their MetaMask and link it, and therefore, but their idea of engaging the company would be to force only users with company emails to be able to sign up. And of course, if you think about it, that's not going to bind the company, right? So all you're doing there is binding the individual. So even in that situation, what you really need is you need an old-fashioned agreement between yourself and the company in order to onboard the company. Um, so when you look at Web3 users and from a legal perspective, it's always important to remember that, there are certain requirements that need to be followed, which are a bit old school, but unfortunately, because of the legal world we live in, it has to be done that way.
Mm-hmm. So with old school, you mean a classical, traditional contract that both parties sign
Not
up? No?
not smart contract, yes. Traditional old party, old school, maybe DocuSign, okay, that's as newfangled as it gets. But traditional contract, yeah.
Yeah, that would be the innovation within the contract, making contract deals, so that you can sign on DocuSign and give it on without meeting the person. So that's possible, right? So DocuSign is fine.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's
e-
fine.
e- with your electronical signature. Okay, got it. But you would say that a smart contract wouldn't count. So this is something that we would say this is not a legal agreement between two parties.
So a smart contract is an interesting concept. And to me, there's a legal question as to whether a smart contract is even a contract. And it's not a contract just because we call it a smart contract.
Okay.
In actuality, a smart contract really is software code, right? That's literally what it is. So, in its simplest form, you go to the vending machine, you put $1 in, there is some kind of software code inside there that dispenses a drink, and that's a smart contract.
Yeah.
So in the same way, if you had a smart contract and you brought that before the court will recognize that as software code, and
Okay.
they won't look at it and say, look, this says you have to do that because the judge is not going to know software code. Maybe one fine day in the future, judges will understand software code just by looking at it, but at the moment that's not the case. So, looking at the terms, if you bring a smart contract to court and say, look, I didn't get my deal, even though the smart contract says this, the judge is going to say, look, where's your paper contract? Where are your paper terms? I don't understand what this says. To me, that's not a contract. To me, that's a line of software code. So you have to produce a document that says what you are supposed to get, as opposed to just showing up with a smart contract itself.
Okay. Interesting. But this also indicates that it's a generational thing. So because of the judges, they don't use and get. I understand the technical things. They would not judge it and wouldn't even accept it to some degree. And okay, yeah.
Yeah, it is generational. I mean, I wouldn't put it past the possibility of, several years in the future when everybody can read code, that a judge maybe 50 years in the future will look at the smart contract and immediately understand what it says. Like,
Mm.
some people on Twitter, they post about smart contracts and they have the string of code and they're telling you what it says. And to me, I don't understand that. But, maybe my kids and your kids will. So from there, who knows what will happen.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Because I thought it's like a legal agreement, but yeah, that's not the case. Yes. Okay.
So
I
if
have
you,
to.
I guess
Yeah.
I guess if you
Sorry.
look at a situation like, okay, so let's say you have a DAO, right? And
Mhm.
the DAO is operated by a smart contract. And if everybody votes in a certain way, the smart contract has changed. So if the smart contract doesn't get changed in the way that the DAO wants, for example, because the person implementing the DAO didn't do a good job with the code, then what do you have there? There has to be some kind of an agreement between the person controlling the DAO and the participants in the DAO, that the person operating the DAO is going to write the code as the DAO wants it to, right? So that in itself needs a separate contract. So, like recently when we were talking to a client about the potential of structuring a DAO, the questions as to what documents you need as part of this DAO did come up. So that's another example of why you would need traditional pieces of paper in addition to your smart contract.
Yeah. So at least within the organization. So how do you structure? So which partners do you have? But would I need for every DAO member who's coming and want to make a vote? Should I also make a contract with each one of them who's coming in?
Ideally, you should,
Okay.
or at least you set out a set of terms and conditions somewhere. I
Yeah.
mean, traditionally, of course, I think what's really striking in the Web3 world versus the Web2 world is that, when you download an app from the App Store, they make you agree to a set of terms and conditions that you may or may not read, right? And everyone does that in the Web2 world. Of course, in the Web3 world, this does not happen. And it's very interesting to me why this does not happen. Um, it seems to be assumed that you don't need it anymore, but I wouldn't necessarily go so far as to say that's the case.
Yeah. But just to sum it up so that I got it, just to make sure that I understand it. So from a legal perspective, this means it doesn't change that much, right? So as a business owner, I have to think about contract and how to save myself and the business. And
That's exactly right.
yeah, okay.
Yeah. So the
So
idea really is you have to take into account the existing laws.
mhm,
There may be things in Web3 which mean that certain laws don't apply, but generally speaking, you have to take into account the fact that there are existing laws, and it cannot just be, oh, it's Web3. Until there's regulation, I can do whatever I want. That's the wrong mindset.
mhm. And are there, so maybe, I mean, this is a complex question, but maybe you can, I'm sure you know it for the case of Singapore. So when it comes to regulations, are there things coming? So for example, I have a separate show about the content AI tools, the content AI show. And I mean, the AI Act is coming within the European Union. And but when it comes to Web3, how is it? What do you expect? For the future, or is there something planned that is coming when it comes to regulations?
I guess in Singapore, from the perspective of Singapore, the traditional way that Singapore looks at this is that they don't want to stifle creativity and they don't want to stifle innovation. So insofar as there are innovative elements of Web3, they are fully on for that. It's just that when there are situations where people have the chance of losing a lot of money, or gambling, as they would call it, their money away, that's where they feel that certain lines have to be drawn. And so, recently there have been certain suggestions that they are going to curtail certain retail investment in crypto. So, for example, you need to pass a test in order to buy crypto as a retail investor, or you can't buy crypto as with a credit card. And they wanted to put a stop to staking of crypto.
Mhm.
So, there's certain things that they want to implement as more of a form of public protection. And that is something that the Singapore government has been very consistent about in the way they operate.
Mhm.
But going back to the broader scheme of enabling the technology, that's something that they're open to do. Now, in
Yeah.
terms of AI, for example, I mean, we still have the rule in Singapore that you can't get copyright out of an AI generated work. So if the AI generates a picture, there will be no copyright that subsists in that because you need a human author. So again, that's something that potentially has to change. I think certain steps are being taken in other countries to look at this issue, and I'm sure that's something we will follow up on ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, that's a more realistic. I mean, it's not. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I appreciate your job and what you do, but oftentimes entrepreneurs don't think about this. It's like a little bit like thinking about taxes. So as an entrepreneur, you want to create some cool project, some cool product and services, but you don't think about the legal perspectives and also the tax perspective. But yeah, okay. Cool. So the
No,
clients that you spoke about, they were mainly located in Singapore, or are they around the world? How is it? So just interesting from the location.
They're mainly located in Singapore, although some of them also have certain international presence, so they'll be present in
Okay.
more than one country.
Yeah.
So, for example, there are some that are, they want to structure based on certain entities in Singapore, but they have also opened certain entities in Dubai for regulatory reasons, because
Yeah.
Dubai's regulations are a bit more lax than Singapore in certain ways.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Okay.
yeah, they're all over the place.
That's
And
also what
obviously,
I would. Yeah. Sorry.
no, I was gonna say, like, obviously when we have the big conferences here as well, we get people from all over the world that come here. So, I mean, fundamentally Web3 is a very international space.
Yeah, definitely. So it's like with the AI space. So it's to some degree it's a big niche, and not a big niche. It's a niche, but the people who are within them, they are very enthusiastic and also want to share their knowledge. That's really cool. That's so far what I experienced. Yeah, and
Yeah,
yeah, very
that's my
international.
experience. They are very collaborative and they're
Yeah,
very open. And if you want to sit down with them, everyone is willing to talk to you about what they're doing. It's a very positive aspect of this space in my
definitely. Yes,
Hmm.
definitely. Yeah. Okay. Um, So to sum up, so for a traditional business who is in the Web2 area and don't have the big budget like Nike or other big corporations, um, and they want to start their own Web3 project, so the advice would be just make sure that you understand the legal perspective within your country and also with cooperation partners before you start your Web3 project. Would that be the advice that you would give?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, basically, don't forget what you know from Web 2,
Yeah,
when you go into Web 3. And
which
obviously,
is
like
uh,
you mentioned, like big companies like Nike, and Nike obviously, is heavily lawyered up. They know exactly what their rights are, right, whenever they do these things.
yeah.
So obviously, as a Web 2 company, even as a small one, it would be wise to remember that as well.
Hmm. But it gets so complicated when I started, and I have, I don't know, people who are coming in from the US or from Australia or from Japan. It, I should have to know all these legal things for each country, right? So so if somebody is going on my website from the US, it should be checked if this is conform of American uh, laws. Would that be so? It needs a personalized website for each nation. Would that be
So
something? Oh,
Well, okay, so as you rightly say, this is not new, right? So obviously people have been trading internationally for years, on traditional websites. If you put up a website and you're targeting certain customers of certain countries, you have to know the laws of those countries. Let's say you're
yeah,
not
makes
targeting somebody in the US, you're targeting someone in England, and you've put up your website, but someone in the US comes on anyway. Arguably, there's less of a reason to consider, that user. But let's say, for example, I'm a Singapore website, and I take certain data of the users that come on the website, and some of these users are from Europe, for example. And if I collect their personal data, I would need to comply with GDPR regulations in
Mhm.
Europe, right? So
Yeah,
in the same way, these considerations do take place.
yeah,
They've been the case forever.
yeah, yeah, makes sense. Yeah.
And I guess if you think
Okay.
about it, in the Web3 world, there's no suggestion that there's going to be a unified government, like what you get on, like, I don't know, like Star Trek or something, right? Where
World
there's a
government.
United Earth Federation,
Yeah,
with one set of federal laws. So
yeah.
there are questions then of, I mean, what's going to happen? Are we going to really get Web3 when we still have these national laws in place? And how is that going to be an impediment to what we want to achieve in Web3?
Yeah, yeah, makes sense. Yes. So a legal framework on a national, on an international level would be interesting. But who is going to, yeah, push that one, push that agenda? Yeah. But yeah, just an idea. So because I also had this conversation to some degree also with Andit from Rimas, where we
Okay.
thought about AI governance on an international level and things like that. But that's another topic. Maybe just to come to a conclusion, can you maybe just explain? So what is RPC exactly doing? So you give legal advice to corporations, right? Just maybe in your own words.
So basically, RPC is a law firm. It's a very strong tech practice. So as a tech law firm, we represent, companies like Google, Facebook, and we do all sorts of tech related work as part of what we do. That includes software agreements, personal data protection, IP related agreements, some competition related advice and disputes. And yeah, so basically anything revolving around the tech space is something that we've been doing for years. Um, Specifically, that's our tech practice. We also have practices in other areas,
Yeah,
insurance, general disputes, just to name a few. So
yeah,
so there's and we would obviously advise not just big corporations, but also small companies, startups, individuals.
yeah.
Um, as long as it's something that we can help in.
Okay, got it. Cool. Yeah. Really appreciate your time. Was pleasure. Is there something that you want to share or some last statement that I didn't ask about, or maybe I forgot, or something that you would love to say? So for all the entrepreneurs out, out there in the tech space. So I'm a big techie. So I just love technology, software, especially software as a solution. So that's the reason why I do these live shows, because I think um, uh, tech can help us. I mean, to some degree, it's also good to just close the smartphone and the laptop, but tech helped me a lot, and also AI. So that's the reason why I'm doing these things. So is there something that you would love to some last thing?
Well, tech obviously, is not going anywhere. I mean, obviously, if you have shares in tech companies now, you're getting busted. But this tech is here to stay, and obviously, what we will see in 20 years, maybe something that's completely different from what we have today. There's some people that laugh at what we see in terms of the metaverse, for example. Like,
Mhm.
they say there are not a lot of unique users on Sandbox or Decentraland. And obviously, what that will become, we don't know. I mean, with companies like Meta pushing in as well, they have the muscle to do something that maybe the smaller players can't. And so we may laugh today at, why on earth would I put on these silly goggles and do these things? But it may become the norm in several years, and that's the interesting thing that I look for in tech, trying to understand where the space is going, and what kind of laws will affect it. And I guess the real message is something I said before, which is really there's so many possibilities and so many interesting aspects of Web3, but it's just important to remember that it's not an area that's devoid of laws. The current laws do apply, so it's very important to speak to legal advisors to understand how best to protect your rights. Make sure you're not doing anything that's potentially illegal. Just because you see somebody else doing it in Web3 doesn't necessarily mean that you can do it yourself or in your country, for example. Um, and of course, we will have to look out to see how the laws will change and how the regulation will expand to take into account what's been happening as well. So it's an
Yeah.
active space, and it's good to keep an one ear and one eye on the legal changes that are taking place in the landscape.
Yeah, yeah. So, are there any platforms that you can recommend where I mean, I don't mean Google Alert or something, but where do you inform yourself? Do you check legal, uh, so law pronouncements or things like that? So, where do you get the information?
So I guess as a layman, like LinkedIn is a pretty good platform. A lot of people don't really like LinkedIn because it's just a lot of
Really?
people like, like it might think it's too business-like or something, but I,
I'm a big
you know,
fan of LinkedIn, but
oh,
yeah.
okay.
Anyway,
I get the impression that most Web3 people would prefer to be on Telegram or Discord or Twitter. And to some degree, I do post on Twitter as well. I think my firm does. Does also post these articles on Twitter.
yeah,
And And there are other lawyers there that I know who do. So, Twitter may be a good place to learn about legal issues relating to Web3 in the same way that, I get a lot of my Web3 information from Twitter because, the way people are very keen to post about such things.
Okay.
So
Good to
really,
know.
it's Twitter, LinkedIn. There's some Discord groups, I think, that talk
Yeah.
about these things. Or, within your own Discord communities, I'm sure there will be some lawyers who you can speak to on a casual basis. So
Yeah.
there are avenues. They're not mainstream, but they're there.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. I also recommend Discord. So I had, when it comes especially for Web3, I had really good experience on that one, and yeah,
Mhm.
met really cool people. Cool. Thank you very much. And it was really interesting to speak with you. I think this is a topic that is under the radar of many entrepreneurs, but still very important. So yeah, that's. I will definitely put the link. Maybe we can just put the link into the chat so that people can check it. So that's the link that you gave me. Oops. Just let me check. Here we go. That's the
Mhm.
one, right? So
Yeah, that's right.
rpc.co.uk, and then people can also find your profile on Nicholas Lauw. Okay, thank you very much, and thanks
Thank
for
you.
watching. Yes, just stay in line. We have a short chat afterwards, and thanks for watching. If there are any questions, just let us know in the comment section, and I can forward to Nicholas. And yeah, see you on the next episode. Thank you, and bye bye.
Thank you.